Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you may be. Welcome to the Canadian Legal Innovation Forum's Fall 2022 webinar series. I'm Andrew Bowyer. I am the founder of the Canadian Legal Innovation Forum. Our series is comprised of a set of focused discussions on the intersection of business and law with speakers from law firms, legal departments, and their third-party partners from across Canada, the US, and abroad. Today's webinar is focused on how legal professionals are embracing change and driving transformation in law firms. And our sponsor of today's webinar is MinuteBox. I want to thank MinuteBox for being the sponsor today, as well as being a strategic partner of the forum in 2022. Those of you watching, you know how it works. We will begin with our speaker introductions. We have three fantastic speakers here today to talk about change and transformation in law firms from a legal professional's perspective. So let's get going. Karen Anderson, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. Karen Anderson. I'm the manager of corporate services at Blake Castles and Graydon in the Toronto office. We have recently migrated to MinuteBox very successfully, have some very recent experience on the topic.
All right, thanks, Karen. Karen Tushak.
Hi, I'm Karen Tushak. I'm the founder and CEO of Spider Silk Innovative Solutions, otherwise known as Spider Silk Solutions. I've been in the legal field for about 30 years, managing paralegals across Canada and implementing new technology. I started my company about a year ago to help law firms with not only implementing new technology, but continued adoption of that new technology, and really on the backs of the paraprofessionals who I say are the tech champions.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Tiffany.
So hi, everyone. I'm Tiffany Purr. I'm the Director of Customer Success at MinuteBox. My 15+ career spans the industries of legal tech, finance, hospitality, and learning and development in both the public and private sector. For those of you that don't know, MinuteBox is the only no-code legal entity management cloud that supports tens of thousands of entities at scale. We work with some of the largest law firms, general counsel, and accounting firms in the country with three main areas of focus, from entity management, compliance, and knowledge management. Very excited to talk about embracing change and driving transformation today.
All right, thank you, Tiffany. And I'm Andrew Bowyer. I am the founder of the forum. I founded it in 2018. Prior to that, my career started at the Financial Times in London in the UK, and I was with the FT and Bloomberg over a stretch of 13 years in London and New York before I returned to Canada to set up the forum. We will get started here. So we've got three main areas that I want to focus on. And also, I just would encourage the audience to please feel free to ask questions in the Q&A as they come up for you, and we'll try to address them on the spot. And of course, we'll allow everyone an opportunity at the end of the session to ask questions as well, but please feel free to do so, and we will try to address them as they come in. First of all, we want to focus on how legal professionals are defining what change management and transformation means in law firms and what role they are playing in influencing their firm's strategies and implementing those strategies. So the first place to start is what's happened in the pandemic. That's accelerated innovation and change and transformation. Everybody's had to. I think we're at the end of it, but who knows right now as we approach November. But let's talk a little bit about what's changed over the last 3 years almost now in terms of the hybrid model, talent, client service delivery, working internally. So let's start first with the hybrid model, how you're seeing that play out and the impact of that. And we have two Karens today, so I'm going to say Karen A and Karen T moving forward, just to be clear. Karen A, let's start with you. How's the hybrid model impacted the way things are done at Blake's? Tell us a little bit more.
Prior to the pandemic, we had moved to a model where paralegals could work from home, say 3 days a month, 3 or 4 days a month. And there was always uncertainty about productivity and how that would all work. Of course, March 2020 changes everything. And within a week, we have a firm of 1,600 people working from home and fairly seamless transition to that. So there was a lot of discovery around how efficient this could be. And so coming back, we've moved to a hybrid model where the clerks are in between 1 and 3 days a week as needed, of course, if there's client needs for people to be in. And it's welcomed by everybody because obviously it's been such a long time that we've been doing this that people have actually shifted their schedules, their habits, family commitments, whatever it may be. But on the firm side, people have realized that it can be very productive. In fact, they're sometimes getting more out of folks in terms of billable hours or productivity when they are working from home. And so it's been embraced. It's been very successful. I think people do like the hybrid model because there is still some cultural value to being in the office and collaborating with your colleagues. We had our first team meeting in office with lunch and everything yesterday and had great feedback from that because people just enjoy seeing people in person. And I think it just promotes a little bit more conversation and impromptu conversation. So it's been very successful. And I think we'll be continuing with this hybrid model for quite some time.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Karen T, you were at, I think, is considered the world's largest law firm for a long time. And now you consult for a lot of law firms. So how are you seeing the hybrid model evolve? And are you seeing it the same across the board, or are some having everyone come back into work full time? And what do you see? How do you see that working?
So it really is a mixed bag. In fact, I spoke last week at the International Practice Management Association on how to market your team in a hybrid environment. And one of the first questions I asked was how many people are making their employees go back full time, 1 day, 2 days, and it was mixed across the board. There was no real consensus, but for the fact that most firms are giving some sort of flexibility. I think the biggest thing that's coming up is it's becoming a real negotiating tool in recruitment nowadays. So it's becoming a bit of tension to try and balance the way the current people work. And then when you're hiring someone new, they're like, I want 5 days a week or I'm not coming. And there are definitely firms out there that are giving full remote in order to get that key talent in the door. So it's a bit of a balancing act when you're doing recruitment, but most firms have gone to the hybrid model. It's interesting, paralegals that wanted always to work from home are the ones that tend to like to be in the office for some reason. People didn't really know what they wanted, but most people want to go into the office at least a couple days a week just so that they can see people. But it really depends on how the firm is implementing that, because there are some firms that people can come in any day they want. And then there's people that are going in and there's nobody in that day. And they're like, oh, why did I come in? My advice to firms typically is it needs to be a bit more structured, the days people are coming in, so you can make sure that there's a balanced model of how many people are in the office and how many people are working from home.
Yeah, Andrew, I could just add to that. We've established a community day for certain departments where if you know you want to see people in person, if you go in Thursdays, that is usually the day you're going to find most folks in the office.
Okay. That's very interesting. Tiffany, anything to add from what you're seeing in the firms you're working with? And also you're a tech company, so maybe tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think like with the pandemic, it really just forced businesses and social interactions to just rely on technology because of those social distancing rules. The legal industry, being no exception, was really forced to embrace it, shut in some of those processes, and also opening ourselves up to what's at home. So a lot of the time as a vendor, it's interesting because you're talking in regards to the product, you're looking into the implementations, the onboard and the migrations, but even having those conversations while a dog's in the background on a Zoom really allows a different type of connection. And I feel like what the pandemic did show us with this hybrid model is it really got us an inside view into our clients as well and cultivated that vendor-client relationship as much as possible. And I think that in a nutshell was great to see, as well as just being really mindful about what others are experiencing. And hey, I have a cold, I'm dealing with a lot, I can't go into the office, I can't come for those, maybe we had a monthly lunches, and just being mindful all around has really been impactful. But I think it's the new norm now than what we were used to.
Yeah, absolutely. A great answer. Thank you, Tiffany. So I want to move on to the talent, and we touched on the question about talent. We touched on it a little bit. So we had our conference here in Toronto. I'm sure many in the audience were attending. And Karen T, you spoke at it. And the number one rated panel was called The People Puzzle. No surprise there. Talent, the battle for talent is real. And in a legal professional or a paraprofessional context, it'd be great to get a little bit more insights into what that looks like. Because paraprofessionals are extremely valuable to law firms. They don't want to lose them. And with this hybrid model and this environment, there's obviously more opportunities to move around, to work flexibly. So I want to get your take on how that looks on the ground when it comes to paraprofessionals and the battle for talent, because I think the audience would be interested in that. Karen, do the same order again. Karen A, what do you see in your role in terms of?
Yeah, as Karen T touched on, it has a work from home or hybrid model has become a real negotiating point in recruitment. I think we have to be very careful though, that our valuable paralegals, staff, whatever, that have been in place for a long time, don't get pushed down or treated any less than as we're trying to get people in the door. Because I know in the Toronto market right now, it is very tight. It is very competitive. We're heading into less positive economic times. So that also needs to be considered. But I think out of all of this, yes, we want good people in the door, but we really have to remember the folks that have been there for a long time and make sure everybody is treated equitably. You can't bring people in and say, okay, we'll pay you this much more, or we'll give you this, or we'll give you that, and then you have 20 other paralegals that you have to explain why does this. So you just have to be mindful of the fact you want your people to be happy, and you want those valuable people, those people that are going to be in your succession plan to be happy as well. So you just don't want to forget them and leave them behind in all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really interesting balance you must have to strike, right? Because the market rate is saying this and people are asking for that, but then of course you have people who are committed. And that's an interesting thing about paraprofessionals too. They are the backbone of law firms. They stay in law firms for their careers, many of them. Perhaps lawyers move around a bit more. Karen T, what's your take on the battle for talent, what you're seeing, drivers, trends?
So I think firms that really get it are starting to look at the paraprofessionals as a group of themselves and are starting to offer them things outside of just fitting them in with the associates or with the legal assistants. So I often say, and people hear me say it all the time, that the paralegal is like the middle child because they're not the associate and they're not the legal assistant. So where do they fit? And typically firms have just put them wherever it works. But there's been a change in that where firms now are starting to drive professional development programs that are specifically set for paraprofessionals. I'm out there on the street all the time telling people that I think actually the paraprofessional career right now is taking off and is only going to grow because, as you said, associates are moving to the States, they're going to startups, where with paraprofessionals, if you treat them fairly, like Karen said, you treat them fairly, you give them great work, you give them client contact, they're not only doing great work, but they actually become the client retention tool because the client gets to know them and speaks to them because they don't jump around so much. They're actually great in marketing and client retention. So I think firms are really hopefully starting to get that and making sure that they're looking at them as a group and treating them as revenue generators.
That's a really interesting point, Karen. And I think we'll go on to that too, but actually how the role is changing itself. And I'd like to dive into the client relationship management part too. Tiffany, any comments on the battle for talent from what you work with lots of law firms?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really looking at exactly what both Karens touched on, is really looking at what's driving their value, looking at the work-life balance, what hybrid model is available to them, but also just making sure that there are stretch opportunities, development opportunities in their roles. They have outside learning to go back and say, hey, I feel valued at this company. I feel my voice is being heard, but I also feel like there are ways for me to develop and not just focusing on, okay, we need to get new talent. It's about retaining that talent that's in the door. And I've seen it in my career and just from chatting with amazing individuals that there's so much talent out there. And sometimes we forget about the ones that have been here for years and understanding what are their needs. Do they feel valued? Have they been heard by us?
Moving on, thank you, Tiffany. Moving on to the role of the paraprofessional. So how is that changing on the ground? Let's start with the client relationship management stuff. Karen T made a good point that they're the people who are always there, right? So the clients know them. And that's presumably going to change a bit of the business model for firms too, as that becomes the case. And I think the other point you made, Karen T, which also was interesting, is 4 or 5 years ago, people like Richard Susskind were saying the role of don't become a paraprofessional because there's going to be no job for you in 5-10 years. That's the opposite is turning out to be true. And so let's talk a little bit more about the role of the paraprofessional vis-a-vis clients to begin with. So Karen A, maybe tell us a little bit about how you've seen that change and how you're supporting your team in more client engagement and how that's fitting into broader strategy of Blake's.
Yeah, so we've got a range of paralegal law clerks from juniors who assist with compliance things right up to seniors that do transactional work and can be an integral part of transactional team. But to just tie in with the client piece, Karen's quite right. We are like a main point of contact a lot of times, like for in-house counsel, for paralegals at the client, and they will often reach out to us as the initial point of contact for new mandates. It may not be something that we run with, but we can make introductions to other offices, et cetera, and find that, when a lot of clients now are looking for fixed fees on certain matters, and they will specifically ask, can we have a paralegal on this? Because they know that it's just going to be more cost efficient. So in setting up fixed fee mandates and that kind of thing, the paralegals can play a huge role in those scenarios.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Tiffany, I'm going to ask you the second time around. This time, client engagement, you obviously have a technology that paraprofessionals use and clients use. Do you want to maybe comment on how you see that evolving?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a few things. So with some of the lockdowns, it forced some law firms, of course, to temporarily close their offices and really rely on those virtual connections, whether through Zoom or through phone. And clients turned to their devices instead of stopping by the firm's office to read or sign documents or have those connections. So what we saw was the rise of the self-service delivery model. So looking at what can we really look at if we have a question? What are our options? Are there resources? Are there knowledge base? Are there webinars like this? Are there articles that we can utilize? How can we learn without sitting through or being in a boardroom together? So that was one thing we saw. We also saw that that complementary, it ended up being, we saw a really big change in regards to what the values were. Looking at, is there an ease of delivery in the product? Can I go through and learn this product in X amount of time? Or is this going to be a change that's going to take months and months? So what we also saw was I had a lot of cancellations for training sessions, and that was, again, a bit of a shift from what we were used to, but then relying on recordings, relying on how can I get the most information and having basically a knowledge base or a one-stop shop to everything I need to know about this product. Because people were working different hours. I know both Karens, we saw different hours where people were emailing me at 10 p.m. being like, oh, I have a bit of time now. The kids are asleep. Can I watch this recording or can we do a training? Great. Have all these different models and availabilities. And so we had to really shift and change in the way we worked. But in the long run, it was better as an industry to move towards more of a self-service delivery model for sure.
Very interesting. Well, thank you, Tiffany. Karen T, client relationships and paraprofessionals. You are our future looking expert. How do you see this evolving? What do you see this looking like?
So
now, in the future, let's say 2 to 5 years.
So I really think it started early on. It was around 20 years ago when I was working in-house, and I would send out a request to the law firm and the law firm would send it back to the general counsel. And I would send out, and it was indicative that lawyers and law firms thought they needed to always deal with the general counsel at in-house departments until our general counsel said, look, Karen decides where the work's going. So unless you correspond with her, you're not getting the work. And I think that's happening more and more because not only are external clients reaching out to law clerks and paralegals at firms, but more in-house legal departments are staffing themselves with paralegals. And the lawyers at the firms have to get used to the fact that they may be taking instructions from paralegals,
Right.
not always from a lawyer. So I think the client relationship goes both ways. And when I actually train new associates or articling students on working with a paraprofessional, I do train it both ways. Like I said, it's one thing delegating them to them in a law firm, and it's your E&O insurance, but it's another thing when you have to take instructions from them as well. And you really need to be both good on both sides. Because paraprofessionals, we're so detail driven and experts in the processes of what we do, that I think that goes a long way with the clients. And they really, when you look at new RFPs that are coming into law firms, they're asking who are the paraprofessionals that are going to be on our client services team. And that's a real shift.
That's really interesting, right? The service, the process part is almost as important as the content, or at least the way the client views it, which is all what innovation is about, people, process, technology. So I do know we need to move on. We'll have to do another webinar on all the points we were going to cover on this one, hopefully next year in the first quarter. But I want to talk about one more part in this section, which is influencing change in the law firm and the role of the paraprofessional or the legal professional in doing so. Train the trainer is something that we talked about on our planning call. And so tell us about that, about how it's looking like on the ground for you, Karen A. Training, getting uptake of technology within the firm, that type of thing.
Yeah. So as I mentioned early on, we migrated to MinuteBox last year. The process of getting there was democratic, and it mainly involved paralegals from all of our offices, because the firm had an understanding that these are the folks that are using this technology going forward. MinuteBox provided an excellent training program, but we've had key people in our firm that are learning a lot of the stuff and then training other people within the group. And it really just, it keeps evolving, but the driver is the paralegal use. That lawyers can enjoy read-only access to all of these records now, as can the clients. So that as part of the RFPs that Karen was talking about, that's another piece that clients are looking for, access to their records without having to say, hey, can you send me this PDF of this, or can you send me over this hard copy minute book, which is going to the wayside. We're getting completely digitized. So yeah, training all the folks that are using this on an ongoing basis, I think, is key. You think things are evolving all the time, making sure we are using products to their full capabilities. Folks are busy. And I will say the people that have embraced, we had a lot of change in Ontario last year, as anybody who's familiar with the OBR knows. So throw in other change as well. And it's the folks that have really embraced this change and attended training sessions, ongoing training sessions, that have been the most successful with it.
Okay. Karen T, thank you, Karen. Karen T, anything to add? Training?
Yeah, I think training is key, as is adoption. And I'm thrilled to hear Karen say that they're always looking at the new functionalities and driving it, because so often firms will buy technology, will implement it, and then leave. One of the things that we did at Denton's was the paralegals will definitely the drivers of the new technology and what we wanted, but we did have a partner committee as well, just so there was that support at that upper level. And because we do feel that the technology is built within the practice group, so we needed to make sure that the lawyers would support it and I often say that we led the lawyers to the decision, but they did make the ultimate decision.
Yeah, that's a great point. And Tiffany, you're ultimately ensuring that your technology is being used, right? There's no point in adoption is the key challenge, right? Adoption, uptake, getting into people's workflows. That's how you keep being successful. So tell us a little bit about your strategies on that front to make sure that people are getting the information they need, that it's getting buy-in and uptake within the firms you're working with.
Yeah, so I'll say change is hard. We all know that. However, having a change process is really crucial at determining an overall change management strategy. When we look at it, it's regardless of scope and magnitude of a legal department's change initiative, successfully managing that in the workplace really, as both Karen says, begins with the people. So from some of the things or best practices I like to look at is really just starting from the top, the leadership buy-in. is like number one essential. Leaders need to understand the need for change, be committed to making it happen, and then you be united in all fronts and align in others. And being able to provide active sponsorship to drive that awareness for the department's change. And I know both Karens, this is not news to you, but in the training aspects of train the trainer, really creating that ownership at every layer. So with other leaders, the next level comes of ownership, comes in the day-to-day of the organization, or who are closer to the changes, who are working in it in the weeds of that product, and providing them opportunities and responsibilities for really making that change happen, identifying some of those pain points, because they're the users that are going to be using this technology every single day. Yeah. They play a really key role in the whole change management because they're able to translate the vision for the change and impart that. So again, moving into that train the trainer, having your champions train other users to get that buy-in. As much as a vendor can say, hey, I'll jump on any single training call and train you on this software, they're going to listen to the Karens, as an example, them saying, hey, you know what, here's what I found is a great workflow or best practice, but also you would understand what are those pain points that a vendor needs to address the most. I think also there's communication really early on. I know Karen T, you mentioned this in some of your initial discussions at IPMA as well, which was just reinforcing the changes being made with continual messaging that ties back to why this transformation is necessary, and acknowledging the different stakeholders, the different workflows, the different offices. Not every office works the same. And then really just understanding as well the culture and the practice of law, if anyone's inadvertently averse to change, and being able to say that, hey, this isn't going to come easy, but what can we do to really impact our users and help successfully drive that organizational change?
Great answer. Thank you so much. So uncovering the question, so the train to trainer part, absolutely. You find the champions within the firm and they sell on behalf, they sell it internally. And that, how do you overcome people who challenge you on change? Because as Tiffany said, change is hard. I like to do it this way. What's wrong with it? I've done it this way for 20 years. How do you overcome challengers to change? Karen A, maybe you can start with how you address that and how you have your team think about it.
Yeah, so there's no question, as Tiffany said, change is hard. Nobody likes change. And that's all the last 2.5 years have been about, really, when you think about it, is change after change, new ways of doing things. As I said, the folks that are in our group that have embraced technology have been the most successful. And so rather than me just saying, oh no, you just have to do this because this is what we're doing, I would prefer to connect them with the folks that have been more successful. And so they can work together and say, talk to this person because they're having the same issue or they had the same issue. We had one person who, that was the initial reaction, oh, I don't want to change anymore. Why can't we just do it this way? As you said, been doing it this way for 20 years. Why do we have to have more change? But she said, okay, we're doing it. And she had weekly calls with Tiffany's group and just decided, I'm diving into this. And when I saw her yesterday, she said, I can't believe the difference. I've learned so much. And now she said, looking back at what we were doing before, she said, can't even remember how did we do that again? I'm not sure how we did, but I think having peer support is really helpful rather than people just don't want to be told like, okay, we're changing and this is what you're doing. And just providing some of the positive feedback and, oh, hey, do you know how you can do it this way? We've also just started sending emails amongst the groups with little tips. Hey, did you know you could do this? And sometimes people will know you can do that, but just a little one-off. Hey, I never knew I could do this in this product in MinuteBox, just sharing it. And then people can keep all these emails for quick reference. And it's really helpful and encouraging.
Okay, great answer. Thank you, Karen. Karen T, addressing resistance.
So I think it goes a long way if you have everybody included at the beginning. The resistance comes when all of a sudden it's, okay, here's this new product and we're going with it and we're changing your lives, right? So I think the more you're inclusive in the decision-making process of what product to go with, and then the implementation stage is really important. I agree with Karen that having those, I'll say technology champions, so the real The ones on the ground that really understand it are happy to help everybody else. Sometimes you just need to deal with those people that don't defray the process, but you just need to come along with us and don't push them too hard. And some will come and some won't. But from a technology standpoint, there's also so many ways of collaborating nowadays. So set up a Microsoft Teams site, have a frequently asked questions area of that site, right? Have people that can do chats. I would do quick training, 10-minute training on one very specific issue and record it and then have it on the team site so people could look at it. So they're not going through what was typically like a 3-hour training session and then having to find that one little piece they want. So really thinking about how you're collating all of the information and making it easy for the users to get to.
Yeah. Bite-sized change.
Yeah.
Okay, great
Baby
answer.
steps.
Yeah, thank you. So moving on, I want to talk about practice areas that you're seeing are where innovation is having the greatest impact within firms right now, and technology and new processes, and where you're seeing and where the firms are seeing the most opportunity in leveraging those. So Karen A., what practice areas do you see innovating the most right now?
So I can really speak to corporate more specifically. Karen T will have maybe some broader information, but in corporate it's changing everything because clients can, as I said, access their records. It's having cloud-based technology rather than licenses for this and that. And so, yeah, corporate, I think it's huge. And I think that we will continue to see this level of change for a few years. Everybody is in the midst of change right now in corporate groups, and just having that client access. Our lawyers love the read-only access. So if they are working at 11 o'clock at night and they can't get a hold of a law clerk that looks after X corporation, they can go into the site and look at the information that they need very easily. So it's just accessible, it's fast, it's client friendly, and just light years beyond what we were doing before.
Okay, thanks, Karen. Karen T., what?
Yes, so I agree with Karen. The corporate is always inventing itself, but I'm seeing more and more that any transactional practice is really starting. Banking and finance with document automation and closing lists and checklists. It's unbelievable when they start to wrap their mind around things that we used to do in corporate with automation that banking and finance can do now, especially where they have a big client that they're doing a lot of the same types of deals. And it's just getting in those templates and cookie cuttering it. Real estate as well, condo closings, real estate transactions, anything with document automation, anything that can be parceled together and automated is just really changing it. Litigation, they've been doing e-discovery, but those transactional, and the corporate database can handle that as well. It's not like you have to go out and buy 5 different databases, because a lot of the times banking and finance is doing things for the firm's corporate clients. So the information is already there. So just finding new ways to incorporate their documents into it.
Okay. All right. Great answer. And it will be interesting. Obviously, we're at the end of an M&A boom, a transactions boom. So presumably the focus on efficiency is going to be a competitive edge for firms as well moving forward. It will be interesting to check in a year from now maybe and see how that answer has evolved for all of you. Tiffany, you work presumably mostly with corporate. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about what you're seeing in terms of innovation in the firms you're working with and how they're embracing technologies such as the ones that MinuteBox provide for entity management?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously having a bias towards corporate, but what we're seeing is taking their norm, which was, as an example, for compliance, using like a tickler card or an Excel spreadsheet and seeing looking at annuals, look at dates of renewal, looking at start and end dates, and being able to take something that they would be doing manually and moving more into the automated side, like both Karen T and Karen A said, and being able to adopt into a system. And we recently just launched quite a new feature, our compliance module, which had that automation for you. So it was less reliant on the manual, but also taking the guesswork into, oh, did I miss something? Is anything failing in regards to compliance? We also saw a shift in knowledge management from document creation. So taking, Karen, I know you and I have talked about this before, but taking a corporate data summary sheet in a Word file and putting that into a platform like Minutebox and being able to really customize it based on your own practices and your own workflows in your firm. And I think we're seeing so much more in regards to customization. I don't want to just be doing what every other firm is doing. We have a specific brand for our firm. This is what we rely on. This is what we value. And then going into what customizations can be built, what automations can make our day-to-days more efficient and much more easier. And it's been great, to be honest, from an innovation and seeing that change. It's great to see. And it's actually great to learn from so many different firms and so many different clients what they value the most, and being able to have a system that's able to adapt to the new changes is important as well.
Yeah. And presumably that's feeding back into your product development.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Getting that fascinating. That's really interesting. Innovation on the ground in technical terms. So I like that section. So in the interest of time, we've got about 10 minutes or so more for our conversation. I want to talk about technology in the cloud. And obviously the move to the cloud was accelerated by the pandemic. Tiffany, you work for a company that is a cloud-based technology. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about the benefits of the cloud, how you see that evolving, impacting firms' value propositions?
Yeah, absolutely. So cloud-based technologies like Minutebox, of course, are becoming really increasingly popular tool across all law firms. I think investing in a serverless architecture is an effective way to really streamline some processes, save on costs, increase scalability, and enhance accessibility in a nutshell. We're seeing like these practice management systems, these entity management systems can really help to streamline any routine tasks and centralize seemingly disparate systems. Therefore, we see the value in the boost of productivity and efficiency. So those menial tasks can now be ticked off faster than ever, and more time is allocated to what really matters, which are the clients. And we're seeing that a lot. I think the other benefits come in between not having to maintain an expensive and insecure server structure. I will say that there is no team in the world that can keep up with some of the threats with an on-prem service. In my time at Cura Systems, where I worked there for 4 years, it was contract analysis. We had clients that had both on-prem and cloud servers. And what we found, and I know we had this initial discussion when chatting about this webinar, is that they were 3 months behind on a new release because of the amount of work it takes to actually implement new functionality into a system. So when you're looking at as a company, you're maintaining that on-premise service, you're not getting the same client service, but you're also not getting the same in regards to the functionality and the features. And that was kind of one of the biggest drawbacks I ran into with clients was, I don't understand why this person can see all this new functionality and I can't. It actually takes a lot more to adopt. While in an instant, a cloud-based technology, you can get those features and functionalities. I think the one last thing I'll mention is also, I came in expecting downtime windows, and I know I see some of the attendees on the call. We chatted about that at IPMA, and being able to come to a software that says, hey, on a Saturday from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m., there's going to be 4 hours where you cannot use the system, is impactful, and unfortunately can be very frustrating, especially if you have like end of the year items to tick off. But being able to say, hey, we can push out that change and there is no downtime. It's not going to affect any user, is a huge value add for a firm.
All right. Well, you've just extolled the benefits of cloud technology, legal space very well. I know in the interest of time, I'd love to get everyone else's take on cloud-based tech, but I want to move on to our final section. What technology right now is most exciting to you, legal tech or otherwise, in the space, and why? Karen T, you get to see. You have lots of third-party technology companies, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Advocate for them, right? And Yeah.
Legal entity management is huge because I often say that corporate touches every aspect of a firm.
Yeah.
The litigation lawyers, the real estate lawyers, they're all looking for information about corporation clients. So legal entity management is huge. And I always say you really need to make sure that you're not just buying the product, but it's the company that you're dealing with, right? For a cloud-based perspective, cloud-based solutions are great, but you really need to work with your vendor so they understand how making those changes quickly, just to keep the clients in the loop, which I know Minutebox does, because you're going to be making changes, and if you go on in the morning and all of a sudden there's a new field. So it's awesome because you have the most up to date. I also think closing technology.
Yeah.
So technology you can do your entire closing with, and that anything that you can collaborate with your clients, I think is really important. So those closing book technologies that they have, Deal Closer, for example, Structure Flow in the UK, you collaborate with your clients, you're doing all of the documents in one area. They're all securely done. You send the stuff out by DocuSign and it comes back and you whip together a closing book.
Yeah.
So like anything like that really reinvents and invigorizes the way you do the work is huge.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you see firms becoming more receptive to this?
So firms are becoming more receptive to them. A lot of the newer lawyers into the firm. The problem is the adoption. And the training, because they're receptive to it. You show it to them. They think it's great. But then all of a sudden they get really stressed out about a deal, and they know where the paper stuff is, and we're on their iManage where the documents are, or on NetDocs, but they don't remember if they haven't used the system. And that's why I feel that adoption is so important. That continual training, the technology champions, making sure people are continually using it and not just using it as a one-off.
Okay. Karen A., technology that excites you most?
Again, I'm more specific to corporate, but it does spill over into lots of different areas. And as Karen said, people in different departments can still access this information. All they have to do is ask for read-only access. But it also helps on transactional work because all the documents are there and you can share them in a minute, as opposed to in days gone by where you're collecting PDFs, copying the minute book, doing this, doing that. It's all at your fingertips. And it's exciting because it streamlines the processes and it makes everything more cost efficient. We can do things in a lot less time than we did historically, and other offices can access this information. Vancouver is on a different time than us, but they can access it late in the afternoon if people are no longer available, or whatever it may be. The legal entity management and how it can, spread into the other areas and connect to it all exciting to me.
It provides that backbone for everything else, right?
Exactly.
So extremely important. Okay.
Yeah.
Tiffany, you're in the right business then. I want to talk, finally, we've got about 5 minutes left, and there's a question, Tiffany, you may want to answer in the chat about Minutebox. So I'll let you do that. But I do want to talk about, what do firms value most when working with third-party partners? I like to use the term third-party partners rather than vendors, because the whole purpose of the forum, which I started, is about collaboration and everybody working together to solve common challenges. With third-party partners, Karen T., I'm going to rely on you because you get to speak to all of them. What do they need to be doing better with firms, and give us some best practices of the ones who do it the best? We won't get negative about the ones who don't do it so well.
So they really need to, it is a true partnership. And I spoke at Legal Week about that firms are putting innovation into their strategic plans. And if they're doing that, they need to be partnering with the technology partners. So I love that you say it that way, Andrew. But the technology partners really need to make sure that they're listening to their clients, that they're open about their roadmaps, so that the clients know what's coming down the pipe, that they're inclusive of not looking at it like it's our product and we're going to do a roadmap that we want, but listening. Years ago, I sat on a software advisory committee where they said, okay, we have our council of our clients, and we're going to make sure that every release, at the time it was not cloud-based, we're going to put in at least 3 or 4 things that the clients really need, and then look at things that we need to develop as well, because we feel our software needs it. So it's really about the communication and collaboration. As I said before, you're not just buying the product, you're buying the company. And you need to make sure you're maintaining those relationships and working with the law firm for the long haul, not just getting the quick sale,
Yeah.
but working with them hopefully for years to come, because technology companies want their software to be sticky so that
Yeah.
the law firms continue to use it, and it's all built on the relationships. I often say that technology is great at efficiencies, but it can't do client service.
Right.
So
Okay.
that's what the partners need to do.
Words to live by. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll put it above my computer screen. Karen A, what do you value most from vendors? What makes you happy when vendors work with you in a certain way? I don't want to get negative.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think Karen couldn't have said it better. The word that came to mind when you were asking that question initially was just listening to what we're saying, because we're trying to explain how we use this technology on a day-to-day basis, from the smallest task to the most complicated task. But I think if they're listening to all of the team members and responsive to all of the team members, it doesn't necessarily have to be me that's contacting somebody. If anybody on the team can contact the vendor, the partner at any time and get a response and help, then I think that's very valuable, because then everybody has a hand in how we move forward with it. So listening and collaboration, again, it's repeating what Karen said, but it's absolutely what is needed.
And responsiveness too.
It's responsiveness for sure.
Okay. Tiffany, you're going to get the final word here about your approach, both with MinuteBox and on a personal basis, like how you've worked for two fairly major legal tech companies over the last 5-6 years. Why have they been so successful? What are the hallmarks of that? And what can other third-party partners listening in on this call learn from you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's taking every single client as really they're a part of the family. And I know that can get said a lot, but I think Susan Dillon, who's actually on the call, said it best, is this is a family. This is a partnership, making sure that our clients are being heard. They're being able to come to us addressing those pain points. As both Karen said, we're listening, being committed to the process, being committed to the partnership, being committed to the collaboration, and also taking action. So it's not about, okay, we're listening to their issues, we're listening to what they want out of a product, and then months go by and we're not doing anything with that information, but taking action. What are the next steps as a company? What can we align on in regards to our own product roadmap? Because it's not just going to make the client happy, but it's going to make an overall better product. And I think that collaboration in itself is really impactful. I know MinuteBox would not be here and be where it is today without that collaboration and the feedback from our clients as much as possible. And then also having that transparency and communication. I know, Karen T, you also said that it's not just a one-way street, it's a two-way. So we want to make sure that we're communicating and being transparent of what can and can't be done, but also looking at what's next in regards to the roadmap, in regards to the future, and really just building that partnership as much as possible on both sides.
All right. Fabulous answer. Yeah, I think the adage is something like implementing the technology costs 5 times as much as purchasing the technology itself. And to ensure that implementation is collaborative, smooth, ongoing, ensures success for all parties. So great answers from all of our speakers. We're getting to the top of the hour. So I just want to put out, we've had some comments and questions from the audience. So I appreciate those. Are there any other questions that the audience has that you'd like our speakers to address? No? Okay. I guess not. All right. Karen Anderson, Karen Tushak, Tiffany Pereira, thank you so much for sharing your insights on today's webinar. I thought it was very interesting and a great outlook on the evolving role of legal professionals, driving change in law firms, the role of technology and collaboration in the legal ecosystem and how that's evolving. I think we've provided a great case study of how that's looking on the ground. And I know we only scratched the surface of our running notes. I think we probably got through about a third of them. So we're going to have to do another one of these days soon. And I want to thank MinuteBox for supporting today's webinar and also being a strategic partner of the forum. We have a few more webinars this year. We have one on the estates space, November 8th, corporate governance, November 16th, forensics and investigations, forensic investigations, December 1st, and our conference in Vancouver. I hope you can attend. Karen and Tiffany, I know you'll both be there. Karen, you'll be speaking. And so with that, and also any feedback from the audience, again, please do fill out our survey. Appreciate telling us what you thought of it, and more importantly, telling us what you'd like to hear more of from us at CANLIF as we look to 2023. So I hope with that, everybody has great mornings, afternoons, evenings, and thanks again to our speakers, and thanks again to MinuteBox for supporting today's webinar. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.